Hello, I am glad you are here, settling in, letting the day drift away. Take a slow breath and feel yourself grow a little heavier, a little quieter. As you rest, I will guide you into a calm and gentle story, one that moves at an easy pace, a story about distant centuries and the slow birth of traditions that shape the world. Together we will wander back to the early beginnings of the Olympic Games, not in a rushed or dramatic way, but in a steady unfolding of history, following the long path that led to the very first gathering at ancient Olympia. Let us begin our journey far before grand stadiums and cheering crowds, in a time when the Greek world was still young, scattered across mountains, plains, and coastline villages. The land was familiar with wind and sun and the steady rhythm of seasons. People lived close to the earth, watching the sky for signs and listening to the stories of elders who spoke of gods and heroes. These stories were woven into daily life so tightly that they shaped the way people worked, celebrated, and even competed. Before the Olympic Games existed, there were already small rituals and gatherings. They were simple, local affairs, sometimes meant to honor a god, sometimes meant to settle disputes between neighboring communities, and sometimes simply a way for young men to test their strength or skill. Such contests were not yet part of a grand tradition. They were scattered, often temporary, and easily forgotten, but they revealed something important about the early Greeks, a natural desire to challenge themselves, to celebrate physical ability, and to connect ritual with movement. In these early centuries, the Greek world was not unified. It was a landscape of independent city-states, each with its own customs and priorities. Some lived in rocky islands surrounded by sparkling seas. Others lived inland, where valleys opened between mountains and made space for farms, flocks, and small settlements. People traveled only short distances most of the time. Roads were rough, and news moved slowly. Yet somehow ideas spread, carried by traders, sailors, and wandering storytellers who shared tales from one village to the next. Through these slow, moving stories, communities across the Greek world learned about one another, adopting and adapting customs that resonated with them. Among these stories were the ancient myths that later became deeply connected to the Olympic Games. One of the earliest involved Zeus, the king of the gods. According to tradition, before Zeus ruled, the world was in the hands of older powers, including the mighty titan named Cronus. When Zeus challenged him for control of the cosmos, the battle was fierce and long remembered. Some early storytellers claimed that this moment was commemorated through contests of strength held at Olympia, a sacred site in the western Peloponnese. Whether any such contest truly occurred in those early mythic times is unknown, but the idea shaped how later Greeks understood the games. To them, the Olympics were not simply athletic competitions, they were part of a sacred story that tied human effort to divine order. Olympia itself was already an ancient place by the time the first recorded Olympic Games were held. The region was known for its gentle landscape, with the Alpheos River flowing nearby and groves of wild olive trees that offered cool shade. Travelers described the area as peaceful compared to more rugged parts of Greece. People believed that the gods favored this land, and they built shrines long before any official games took place. At first, these shrines were humble, small altars of earth or stone where offerings could be set down, where prayers rose into the quiet air, and where the smell of burning incense drifted through the trees. Over generations, people returned to Olympia again and again. They brought stories with them, and they carried new stories away when they left. Over time, the site accumulated meaning. It became a place where communities felt a shared connection, even if they lived far apart. As more people gathered there for religious festivals, the idea of holding structured athletic contests emerged naturally. Running races and other displays of physical skill were already common in many Greek regions. Bringing them to Olympia, where so many people gathered, seemed logical. At this point in our story, the timeline is still fluid. Written records were rare, and most early knowledge was passed down through memory and legend. Yet historians have pieced together enough clues to understand that by the 8th century BCE, Greece was entering a period of renewed growth. Communities were expanding, trade was increasing, and people were traveling more often. This brought distant groups into contact and encouraged the sharing of customs. It was during this period that the Olympic Games began to take on a recognizably organized form. Tradition holds that the first official Olympic Games were held in 776 BCE. This date comes from later Greek historians who carefully compiled lists of victors and events. Whether the exact date is perfectly accurate is less important than what it represents, a moment when the games shifted from scattered, irregular gatherings to a recurring event known across the Greek world. The people who gathered in that year could not have known how long the tradition would last, how far its influence would spread, or how deeply it would become woven into the identity of Greece. The earliest games were small compared to what they would later become. There were no grand stone stadiums yet, no elaborate temples or statues, and no spectators traveling from thousands of miles away. The main event in those first games was a single foot race called the stadion. It covered a distance that depended on the measurement of the track at Olympia, which varied over time but was roughly the length of a long stride repeated more than 600 times. Runners trained for months, preparing themselves physically and mentally. To win the stadion race was considered one of the greatest honors a Greek man could achieve, not because of wealth or prizes, but because it tied him to ancient tradition and divine recognition. The winner of that first recorded race was a man named Koroibos of Elis. He was a cook by profession, not a soldier or nobleman. This detail, preserved through the centuries, shows how the early games were accessible to ordinary citizens. Victory did not depend on birth or wealth. It depended on dedication, strength, and the will to push the body to its limits. After winning, Koroibos became a local hero, and his name was recorded by later historians, ensuring that his achievement would not be forgotten. But long before his race, long before the cheers of the crowd lifted into the warm air of Olympia, a great deal had already unfolded to shape what the games would become. Communities had formed alliances and rivalries. Priests had tended sacred sites. Kings and councils had debated the rules of festivals. Myths had spread, shifting gradually from place to place. And through all of this, the idea of shared cultural identity grew stronger. People who might never speak to one another directly still felt connected through the stories they knew, the gods they honored, and eventually the games they attended. One of the most important elements that allowed the Olympic Games to flourish was the sacred truce known as the ikacharia. This truce was an agreement among Greek city-states that during the time of the Olympic festival, all conflicts would pause. Armies were forbidden to march on Olympia. Travelers were allowed safe passage. Even bitter rivals respected the truce, understanding that the games represented something beyond local disputes. The truce did not always succeed perfectly, but it worked well enough to allow people from all over the Greek world to travel safely to Olympia, knowing they could return home without fear of encountering soldiers along the road. As the games gained prominence, more events were added. Running remained central, but soon other contests appeared, including wrestling, boxing, and the pentathlon. Each event had roots in earlier traditions. Wrestling, for example, was associated with mythic heroes like Heracles, who was said to have demonstrated unmatched strength in countless stories. Boxing had long been practiced among Greek youths as a test of endurance. The pentathlon combined several skills: running, jumping, throwing, reflecting the idea that a true athlete should be well-rounded. Religious rituals were always intertwined with these competitions. Before the games began, processions moved through the sacred grounds. Offerings were made to Zeus, honoring his role as protector of oaths and guarantor of justice. Priests oversaw sacrifices at the great altar. The smoke from these rituals rose into the sky, visible from many parts of Olympia, reminding everyone present that the games were more than sport. They were an expression of devotion and gratitude, rooted in belief and tradition. Visitors who traveled to Olympia had diverse experiences. Some came as spectators, eager to see the best athletes of their time. Others came to trade goods, taking advantage of the large crowds. Skilled craftsmen brought pottery, metalwork, and textiles. Philosophers and poets traveled there too, drawn by the opportunity to share ideas, recite verses, or simply observe the currents of Greek society. Parents brought children, perhaps hoping they would be inspired by the feats they witnessed or by the stories told around flickering campfires. These gatherings created an atmosphere that mixed festivity with reverence. People slept in tents or simple shelters. They shared meals, told stories, and watched as athletes trained in the days leading up to the competitions. At night, the sounds of conversation drifted through the trees, blending with the hum of insects and the gentle flow of the nearby river. It was a time when the divisions between city-states seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and identity. Though the earliest games were modest, each passing cycle added layers of richness to the tradition. More people attended, more events were introduced. Olympia itself began to grow, with new buildings constructed to accommodate the crowds and to honor the gods. Temples were erected, including the Grand Temple of Zeus, which would later house one of the most famous statues in the ancient world. Roads were improved, making the journey to Olympia easier. Even the rules of competition became more formal, overseen by judges trained to ensure fairness and discipline. Yet even with all these developments, the heart of the games remained the same, a celebration of human ability and divine favor. Held in a place where nature and history intertwined, the games were not designed for spectacle alone. They carried deep cultural meaning, connecting people to their ancestors, their myths, and their shared identity as Greeks. As we continue this history, we will move deeper into the centuries that shaped the games, explore the legends that claim to explain their origins, consider the archaeological discoveries that reveal their true beginnings, and watch the games grow from simple foot races into a powerful symbol recognized across the ancient world. But for now, this is a good place to pause for a moment in the gentle flow of the narrative. After the first recorded victory of Koroibos, the Olympics began to take on a rhythm that would echo through generations. Every 4 years, families, athletes, and spectators would begin preparing long before the festival itself. Young men would train, often under the guidance of experienced mentors who understood both the physical and moral expectations of the games. Athletic training in ancient Greece was not merely about running fast or jumping far. It was a practice of discipline, respect, and self-control. These qualities were essential because the games were viewed as sacred, and any sign of arrogance or dishonor could be considered an insult to the gods. At the same time, women were largely excluded from participation, reflecting the social norms of the time, though they played other roles in the broader festival. Priestesses and local women could make offerings, tend the sacred grounds, and participate in certain religious rites connected to the celebrations. The exception was the Heraian Games, a separate festival honoring Hera, Zeus's wife, where women could compete in footraces. Even in these early centuries, the separation of male and female athletic activities demonstrated the way Greek society structured public and sacred life, emphasizing boundaries while also recognizing the importance of ritual celebration for all members of the community. Traveling to Olympia was an undertaking of some consequence. Roads in the 8th century BCE were rough, often little more than worn paths between villages. Travelers had to plan their journeys carefully, ensuring they had provisions and a safe route. The truce of the games, the chariot, guaranteed that travelers would not be attacked, but it could not prevent accidents or natural obstacles. Bridges over rivers were rudimentary, and rainfall could turn plains into mud that slowed passage. Travelers shared the road with herdsmen and merchants, moving slowly through forests and across hills, guided by the sun and the stars. Arriving at Olympia after a long journey was an achievement in itself, and many would speak of the effort required to reach the sacred grounds as part of the honor of participating. Once at Olympia, visitors would first encounter the sacred grove, a cluster of trees surrounding altars and small shrines. This grove was more than decorative. It was considered a threshold between the ordinary world and the space dedicated to the gods. As people passed under the shade of the olive trees, they were entering not only a physical space, but also a symbolic one, a place where human ambition met divine expectation. Here, rituals were observed, and athletes often offered prayers before even beginning their training. They sought not only physical strength, but also favor from the gods, understanding that fortune and skill together determined success. In these early games, the stadion race remained the central attraction, but it gradually gave way to a broader spectrum of athletic challenges. Wrestling, and the pentathlon in particular, reflected the Greek ideal of versatility. Wrestlers trained to use balance, leverage, and timing rather than sheer brute force, while pentathletes combined running, long jump, discus, javelin, and wrestling in a test of multiple skills. Such versatility was highly admired because it reflected a holistic approach to human capability, demonstrating the balance of strength, speed, and skill. The early pentathlon was not a single event as we might imagine it today. Rather, it was a series of individual contests that together highlighted a competitor's all-around ability. These contests were accompanied by ceremonies that reinforced the religious and cultural significance of the games. Priests conducted sacrifices of animals, usually bulls or goats, at the altars dedicated to Zeus. Victors might offer a portion of their prize as an additional sacrifice, acknowledging that the gods had granted them success. Poets and musicians often accompanied these ceremonies, reciting epic tales or playing lyres to honor the occasion. Music, song, and ritual intertwined with athletic performance, creating an atmosphere that was both celebratory and solemn. It was a reminder that the games were not merely a human endeavor, they were a sacred practice linking mortals to divine power. The social dimension of the Olympics was equally significant. States sent representatives, sometimes entire delegations, to attend the festival. These visitors brought with them not only athletes but also artisans, traders, and philosophers. Market stalls appeared near the sanctuary, selling food, drink, and crafted items. The economic and cultural exchange created by the games strengthened connections between regions, fostering a sense of shared identity among the Greek people. Even rival city-states found themselves temporarily united by participation in the festival. Friendships could be formed, alliances reinforced, and cultural ideas shared, all under the watchful eyes of the gods. Over time, the games evolved in their scale and complexity. The original stadion race eventually expanded to include longer runs, known as the diaulos and the dolichos. The diaulos, roughly equivalent to a middle-distance race, tested endurance and strategy, while the dolichos, a long-distance race, demanded stamina and patience. These additions reflected a growing interest in exploring the limits of human capability. The early organizers of the games understood that variety would draw more participants and spectators, increasing the significance of the festival and reinforcing its role as a central cultural institution. Wrestling and boxing competitions grew in popularity, and by the 6th century BCE, the rules governing these events became formalized. Wrestling matches, for example, were decided when one competitor forced the other to the ground, but certain holds were prohibited to prevent serious injury. Boxing allowed for fewer restrictions, but fighters used leather thongs around their hands to protect themselves. These early practices highlight the Greek concern for both fairness and safety, understanding that the spectacle of competition was valuable. but not at the expense of human life. The pentathlon in particular became a showcase of overall excellence. Winners were admired not only for their victories in individual events, but for demonstrating versatility, balance, and coordination. It was considered a reflection of the ideal Greek citizen, capable of skill, strength, and discipline in multiple arenas of life. The pentathlon, therefore, carried both practical and symbolic significance, teaching spectators and participants alike the importance of cultivating the body alongside the mind and spirit. The Olympic victor, known as the Olympianikos, received great honor and prestige. The rewards, however, were often symbolic rather than material. Olive wreaths, made from the sacred trees of Olympia, were placed on the winner's head. These crowns symbolized victory, dedication, and favor from the gods. In many ways, the honor of victory outweighed any material gain, as the Olympic victor achieved lasting fame through the recording of their name in historical annals. Public recognition, the respect of peers, and the approval of the divine were considered more valuable than wealth or possessions. Despite the growing organization and recognition of the games, they remained deeply intertwined with local culture. The traditions, myths, and rituals that surrounded the festival were continuously reinforced by each new generation. Elders taught the stories of heroes and gods to young people who would later compete, creating a continuous cycle of cultural transmission. By participating in the games, athletes were also participating in a living history, one that connected them to their ancestors, to the land of Greece, and to the divine order that guided human life. One of the remarkable aspects of the early Olympics is how archaeological discoveries have illuminated their development. Excavations at Olympia reveal traces of early stadiums, altars, and buildings, showing the gradual growth of the site over centuries. Pottery and inscriptions from the period provide evidence of winners, events, and the social significance of the games. These findings allow historians to reconstruct the atmosphere and meaning of the festival, giving modern audiences a glimpse into the lives of people who lived thousands of years ago and experienced the same excitement, reverence, and anticipation that we can imagine today. As the centuries passed, the Olympics became more than a local or regional event. They were recognized across the Greek world. City-states such as Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Elis sent representatives, each hoping for victory and prestige. Participation became a measure of civic pride, reflecting the values and strengths of each polis. Political leaders used the games to display their city-states' wealth, discipline, and cultural sophistication. Festivals became occasions to negotiate alliances, display artistic achievements, and reinforce social hierarchies, all under the guise of sacred competition. The early Olympic Games were also a period of intellectual exchange. Philosophers, poets, and scholars attended the festival, sharing ideas, engaging in debate, and observing human behavior. The festival provided a unique opportunity to see people from different regions interact in a controlled, ritualized environment. Ideas about ethics, governance, and civic duty circulated alongside athletic accomplishments. The games thus became a mirror reflecting the values, priorities, and aspirations of the Greek world, both practical and philosophical. Over time, additional structures were built to accommodate the growing number of visitors. The construction of temples, treasuries, and other buildings created a permanent sense of place at Olympia. These structures served both practical and symbolic purposes. Temples provided locations for worship, while treasuries housed valuable offerings from city-states seeking favor with the gods. Together, they created an environment where human achievement and divine presence were visibly intertwined. The early Olympic Games, in all their simplicity and ritualized form, laid the foundation for a tradition that would endure for centuries. They combined physical challenge with moral instruction, religious devotion with civic pride, and personal achievement with social cohesion. In these ways, the Games were much more than mere sport. They were a lens through which the ancient Greeks understood themselves, their gods, and their world. The story of the first Olympic Games is also a story of continuity and adaptation. Over generations, the festival changed, responding to political shifts, cultural developments, and social innovations. Yet the essential purpose remained to honor the gods, celebrate human excellence, and bring together a diverse population in shared ritual and spectacle. This balance of change and continuity is what allowed the Games to thrive for so many centuries, preserving a sense of sacred tradition even as the human and physical landscape evolved around them. Even now, when we look back across millennia, the echoes of that first footrace, that first offering to Zeus, can still be imagined in the olive groves of Olympia. The first athletes, the early spectators, and the sacred traditions they upheld created a foundation upon which all future games were built. Their lives, their dedication, and their reverence for both the gods and human potential resonate across time, offering a glimpse into the beginnings of one of the most enduring cultural practices in human history. The calm rhythm of the Olympic cycle, repeated every 4 years, became a heartbeat of the Greek world. Communities marked time not only by seasons and harvests, but by the anticipation of the Games. Young athletes grew up with the cycle in mind, planning their training to align with the sacred schedule. Families organized their travel, communities prepared resources, and even distant states synchronized their political and social calendars to coincide with the festival. The Games created a sense of shared temporal rhythm, uniting disparate regions in a common pattern that transcended local concerns. The Olympic Games were thus both a reflection and a reinforcement of the values of ancient Greek society. They celebrated physical excellence, moral integrity, and social cohesion, while simultaneously promoting cultural exchange, political negotiation, and religious devotion. From the modest footrace of Koroibos to the full array of athletic, ritual, and social practices that evolved over centuries, the Olympics became a living symbol of what the Greeks valued most: the harmonious balance of human endeavor, divine favor, and communal life. Even the simple act of recording victories, names, and events contributed to the enduring significance of the festival. Lists of victors, inscribed on stone or recited orally, provided a historical record that linked generations together. To win at Olympia was not only to achieve immediate glory, but also to enter into a narrative that would outlast an individual's lifetime. This awareness of legacy, of connection across time, added depth and meaning to every race, every throw, and every wrestling match. It reminded athletes and spectators alike that they were part of a long and ongoing story, one that began centuries before them and would continue for centuries to come. The story of how the first Olympic Games really began is, therefore, not a single event or moment. It is the culmination of centuries of cultural development, religious devotion, social cooperation, and human curiosity. It is the product of countless small choices, journeys, and gatherings that gradually coalesced into a festival of extraordinary significance. In this sense, the Games were not simply created. They emerged naturally from the fabric of Greek life, evolving organically as communities sought to honor their gods, celebrate their youth, and recognize human excellence. And as the story unfolds further, we will see how the Games, while rooted in religious and cultural practice, also became a political and social force, influencing city-states, shaping identities, and spreading Greek culture beyond the borders of Olympia itself. The Olympics were more than a contest, they were a mirror of a civilization, a sacred space where history, myth, and human ambition converged. Here, we pause briefly in our story, allowing the image of ancient Olympia to settle in your mind. The quiet groves, the slow flow of the Alpheos River, the shadows of olive trees over dusty tracks, and the anticipation of athletes preparing for contests that would honor gods and history alike. As time moved forward, the Olympic Games began to attract attention far beyond the region of Elis and Olympia. Word of the festival traveled slowly at first, carried by traders, wandering poets, and travelers who had witnessed the contests firsthand. The more distant city-states of Greece, such as Athens, Sparta, and Corinth, began sending delegations not only to compete, but also to observe, learn, and participate in the social and religious life of the festival. This expansion of influence was gradual, reflecting the slower pace of communication and travel in the ancient world, yet it marked the beginning of the Olympics as a unifying force among the otherwise independent and often rivalrous Greek city-states. With the arrival of athletes and spectators from far-off regions, the organization of the Games became more complex. Temporary accommodations had to be arranged for visitors who came days or even weeks in advance. Vendors and artisans began to set up stalls, providing food, drink, and tools, as well as souvenirs to commemorate victories or participation. Temporary platforms for judges and spectators were constructed, marking the first steps toward the monumental architecture that would later characterize the sanctuary. All of this activity created a rhythm of preparation and anticipation, a slow crescendo that mirrored the natural rhythms of the land itself. Religious observances continued to occupy a central role in the festival. Priests oversaw the preparation and presentation of sacrifices, ensuring that every ritual detail was performed according to tradition. Altars were cleansed, animals were carefully selected, and prayers were offered to Zeus and other deities. Each action carried symbolic weight, emphasizing the link between human effort and divine favor. Athletes, aware of this sacred dimension, often spent days in quiet reflection, fasting, or performing small devotional acts before their competitions. The spiritual preparation was considered just as essential as physical training, reinforcing the holistic approach to human excellence that the Games embodied. The stadium itself, though still modest in its early form, became a central focus. Initially a simple stretch of leveled earth, it eventually acquired stone markers to indicate starting and finishing points, ensuring fairness in competition. Judges chosen for their knowledge and integrity monitored the races closely. Their role was vital, for fairness and honor were at the heart of the festival. Athletes could be disqualified for cheating, bribery, or unsportsmanlike conduct, emphasizing that moral character was as important as physical prowess. This insistence on ethical behavior contributed to the enduring prestige of Olympic victories, distinguishing them from mere athletic success. By the 6th century BCE, additional events had firmly established themselves in the Olympic program. The diaulos, a race twice the length of the original stadion, tested endurance, while the dolichos, a long-distance event, pushed athletes to the limits of stamina. Wrestling became a sophisticated contest of strategy, technique, and strength, with athletes demonstrating skill in balance, leverage, and timing. Boxing, still a brutal contest, evolved with protective measures, including leather wrappings on the hands, to reduce the risk of severe injury. The pentathlon, a composite of 5 different challenges, running, long jump, discus, javelin, and wrestling, highlighted versatility and the ideal of the well-rounded athlete. Each event carried both physical and symbolic significance, reflecting the values of Greek society and the ideals of excellence in multiple domains of life. The audience played a crucial role in shaping the atmosphere of the Games. Families, traders, diplomats, and ordinary citizens all gathered to observe. Spectators' reactions were measured and respectful, reflecting the sacred nature of the festival. While excitement and admiration were natural, the Greeks valued decorum, recognizing that the Games were not a spectacle for spectacle's sake, but a ritual that honored the gods and reinforced social cohesion. Poets and storytellers often recited epic tales of heroic deeds, blending entertainment with moral instruction. Reminding all present of the virtues the Games sought to celebrate: courage, discipline, fairness, and reverence. The economic dimension of the Games also grew. The influx of visitors stimulated trade and craft production, Artisans produced commemorative pottery depicting athletic events, statues of famous athletes were commissioned, and temporary marketplaces offered goods from across the Greek world. The Olympics thus functioned not only as a religious and athletic festival, but also as an economic catalyst, drawing resources and attention to Olympia, while providing opportunities for distant city-states to display wealth, craftsmanship, and civic pride. Political dynamics, too, were influenced by the festival. City-states saw the Olympics as a venue to assert influence and prestige. Victories by athletes were often interpreted as reflections of a city-state's strength, discipline, and cultural refinement. Leaders sponsored training programs, funded travel to Olympia, and commissioned statues or monuments to commemorate victories. At the same time, the sacred truce, the chariot, allowed temporary peace between rival city-states, demonstrating the unique political function of the Games. For a brief period, hostilities ceased and participants moved freely along roads that might otherwise have been unsafe. This truce, while sometimes imperfectly enforced, symbolized the capacity of shared cultural and religious traditions to transcend local conflicts. The artistic and intellectual dimensions of the festival were intertwined with athletics. Sculptors and painters began to immortalize athletes in their works, capturing the grace, power, and idealized forms of the human body. These visual representations reinforce cultural ideals, linking physical excellence to moral and aesthetic values. Poets composed odes praising victors, recounting their achievements, and celebrating the human spirit. Philosophers, particularly in later centuries, observed the Games as a means of understanding human nature, the relationship between mind and body, and the moral implications of competition. The Olympics thus became a multidimensional experience, combining sport, art, religion, and philosophy in a single, enduring cultural institution. Women, while largely excluded from competition, remained integral to the spiritual life of the Games. In addition to the Heraean Games, which allowed women to race in honor of Hera, female participants contributed to the festival through ritual, religious observance, and hospitality. Priestesses maintained sacred altars and supervised certain ceremonies, ensuring that the spiritual dimensions of the festival were preserved. Women of the participating city-states also played a role in supporting athletes, offering encouragement and guidance, though their involvement was circumscribed by the gender norms of the time. The influence of the Olympics extended beyond Greece. As the festival grew in prestige, neighboring regions observed and, in some cases, adapted aspects of the tradition. Trade routes carried stories and ideas to distant lands, spreading knowledge of the Games and their significance. While the Olympics remained distinctly Greek, the cultural exchange they facilitated contributed to broader patterns of interaction in the ancient Mediterranean world. Travelers returned home with tales of athletic skill, religious ritual, and the beauty of Olympia, inspiring imitation, admiration, and dialogue across borders. Archaeological evidence sheds light on this period of expansion and sophistication. Excavations reveal the gradual development of permanent structures, including temples, altars, and treasuries. Stone markers and inscriptions record the names of victors and the events in which they excelled. Pottery, figurines, and carved reliefs depict athletes in motion, providing visual confirmation of the events described in historical accounts. Together, these artifacts illuminate the lived experience of the festival, showing how sport, ritual, and civic identity were intertwined in the social fabric of ancient Greece. Over the centuries, the Games became a measure of personal and civic achievement. Victories brought honor to the athlete, their family, and their city-state. Lists of victors were carefully maintained, creating a sense of continuity and historical record. In this way, the Olympics functioned as both a temporal marker and a repository of memory, connecting the present with the past and projecting significance into the future. The fame associated with victory encouraged athletes to train rigorously, reinforcing discipline, perseverance, and focus. which were considered as important as natural talent. The sacred dimension of the festival continued to shape behavior and expectations. The altar of Zeus, the temple of Hera, and other sacred sites within Olympia served as constant reminders that the games were not simply a human endeavor, but an offering to the divine. Athletes and spectators alike were expected to behave with honor and respect, recognizing the presence of gods and the spiritual significance of their actions. Even the smallest details of preparation, such as the careful placement of offerings or the selection of animals for sacrifice, carried symbolic meaning. The festival was a demonstration of human reverence for divine order, reflecting the interdependence of mortal effort and spiritual favor. The evolution of the games also reflected broader social and political changes. As city-states grew in power, influence, and cultural sophistication, they invested more resources in training athletes, constructing facilities, and commemorating victories. The Olympics became an arena for asserting civic identity, demonstrating cultural refinement, and negotiating status among competing polities. Athletic prowess was closely tied to political influence, with prominent victories serving as evidence of a city-state's vitality, discipline, and social cohesion. At the same time, the sacred truce allowed for a temporary suspension of conflict, reinforcing the unifying potential of shared religious and cultural practices. Athletic training itself became increasingly formalized. Young men were often assigned mentors or trainers who provided guidance in physical conditioning, technique, and strategy. Training regimes included running drills, strength exercises, and practice in specialized events such as wrestling or discus. Athletes learned to balance intense preparation with rest and nutrition, understanding that endurance, precision, and consistency were crucial to success. These practices laid the groundwork for the sophisticated systems of athletic preparation that would characterize later periods of Greek sport, demonstrating a deep understanding of the human body, performance, and the psychology of competition. The cultural significance of the games extended to the arts and literature. Poets composed verses celebrating victories, praising both athletic skill and moral virtue. Sculptors created statues capturing the idealized human form, emphasizing harmony, strength, and balance. Philosophers observed and reflected upon the moral and social implications of competition, considering questions of fairness, honor, and human potential. The Olympics thus served as a lens through which Greek society explored the relationship between the individual and the community, the body and the mind, and human effort and divine favor. At the heart of all this was the celebration of human excellence. The games emphasized that achievement required dedication, discipline, and courage. They provided a framework in which personal effort was recognized and rewarded, not only with immediate acclaim, but also with lasting honor in historical memory. Athletes became embodiments of cultural ideals, models of physical and moral virtue whose example inspired both contemporaries and future generations. Even the spectators played a role in reinforcing these values. Their presence, admiration, and respect created an environment in which excellence was visible and socially recognized. Parents, elders, and peers observed and assessed the performances, imparting lessons of perseverance, fairness, and respect for tradition. The audience, in this sense, was both witness and participant, contributing to the moral and social framework that defined the Games. The early Olympic Games were thus a complex and evolving institution, simultaneously religious, social, political, and athletic. They reflected the values and priorities of Greek society, provided a platform for cultural exchange, and created a sense of continuity and identity across time and space. From the first recorded footrace of Koroibos to the multi-event festivals of later centuries, the Olympics grew into a symbol of human potential, divine favor, and communal cohesion. This long, steady rhythm of preparation, competition, and celebration continued to shape the lives of countless individuals and communities. Each Games, though temporally bounded, left lasting impressions on the people who participated and the cities that sponsored them. Victories were recorded, statues erected, poems composed, and rituals observed, creating layers of memory that connected generations. Through this process, the Olympics became not merely a festival, but a living tradition, one that preserved the ideals, stories, and values of the Greek world. The story of the first Olympic Games, therefore, is not simply a story of sport. It is a story of culture, society, religion, and human aspiration. It is a story of how communities come together to celebrate excellence, honor tradition, and connect across time and space. It is a story of preparation, anticipation, and reverence, of young men running under the shade of olive trees, of judges watching carefully, of priests offering sacrifices to the gods. It is a story of the gradual unfolding of human civilization, reflected in a single festival that would endure for centuries. Here we pause again, letting the image of ancient Olympia settle. The tracks stretching beneath the sun, the gentle river flowing nearby, the sacred olive groves, the murmurs of spectators, the quiet prayers of athletes preparing for their moment of glory. As the Olympic Games progressed through the centuries, their influence began to extend beyond the immediate physical space of Olympia. By the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, city-states from across the Greek world understood the Games as more than a regional festival. It had become a central institution linking widely separated communities. The sense of shared identity among Greeks was reinforced by the festival as citizens traveled from islands and coastal towns, from the mountains and plains of the mainland, to participate, observe, and compete. The Olympics became a stage upon which the ideals of Greek civilization could be displayed, admired, and remembered. Athletes trained with remarkable dedication, often beginning in childhood. Boys from prominent families were sent to gymnasiums, where instructors guided them through a regimen of physical exercises, wrestling practice, running, and various strength-building activities. Gymnasiums were not merely athletic centers, they were educational spaces where moral, social, and intellectual instruction accompanied physical training. Young athletes were taught discipline, respect for elders and the gods, and the ethical conduct necessary to compete honorably. Victory at Olympia was therefore the culmination of both physical prowess and moral education, linking personal achievement to societal values. The concept of time itself became intertwined with the Olympic cycle. The 4-year interval between each festival, known as an Olympiad, became a unit of measurement for historical chronology, allowing Greeks to organize events, document political changes, and remember victories. When historians or poets recounted events, they often referenced the Olympiad in which they occurred, tying personal and civic achievements to the rhythm of the Games. This cyclical understanding of time reinforced the sense that the Olympics were both a constant and a touchstone, connecting the generations and embedding the festival into the fabric of Greek life. Religious observance remained a cornerstone of the festival. The Temple of Zeus, constructed during the 5th century BCE, housed one of the most extraordinary statues of the ancient world, a chryselephantine-esque gold and ivory representation of the god himself, crafted by the sculptor Phidias. This statue served as a powerful reminder of the divine presence at Olympia, emphasizing that the Games were not simply human contests but offerings to the gods. Sacrifices of bulls, goats, and other animals were conducted with careful attention to ritual precision. Priestesses and priests ensured that the ceremonies honored Zeus and other deities appropriately, reinforcing the sacred nature of the festival. The addition of new events reflected both cultural values and practical developments. Equestrian contests, including chariot racing, were introduced as city-states sought to demonstrate wealth and prestige. Ownership of horses and chariots was costly, making these events a display of social status as well as skill. Victories in equestrian events often brought enormous honor to the owners, though the drivers themselves were sometimes professionals or slaves. In contrast, footraces, wrestling, and the pentathlon remained accessible to free citizens, highlighting a balance between public display, personal achievement, and social inclusivity. Spectators played an increasingly active role in the atmosphere of the festival. While still expected to observe decorum, they contributed to the excitement and ceremonial grandeur of the games. Families traveled together, sometimes carrying offerings to Zeus or Hera, sometimes simply to witness athletic excellence. Markets and gatherings around the sanctuary created spaces for social interaction, cultural exchange, and even philosophical discussion. Poets and musicians recited epic tales of heroism, skill, and moral virtue, reminding the audience that athletic performance was deeply connected to the ideals of Greek culture. Political implications of the Olympics also became more pronounced. Leaders recognized that victories by athletes from their city, state could enhance prestige and demonstrate civic superiority. Sponsorship of athletes, investment in training facilities, and the construction of commemorative monuments reflected both civic pride and strategic political positioning. At the same time, the sacred truce, or ikacharia, ensured that Olympia remained neutral ground, a rare space where temporary peace allowed participants to gather safely despite ongoing conflicts elsewhere. This delicate balance between competition, honor, and diplomacy underscores the complexity of the festival's social function. The moral and philosophical dimensions of the games were reflected in the behavior of athletes and spectators alike. Competitors were expected to demonstrate courage, discipline, and fairness. Cheating, arrogance, or violent conduct could result in public censure or disqualification. Victories were celebrated not solely for their physical achievement, but for the demonstration of ethical conduct, reinforcing the link between human endeavor and moral excellence. Philosophers observed and discussed the implications of competition, using the festival as a framework for exploring human virtue, justice, and the cultivation of character. Women's roles in the festival, while limited, remained significant in maintaining the spiritual integrity of the games. In addition to the Heraean Games, women participated in religious ceremonies, attended as spectators in designated areas, and provided support for athletes. Priestesses tended sacred sites, supervised rituals, and ensured that religious practices were carried out correctly. These roles highlight the broader cultural integration of gender-specific duties and responsibilities, reflecting a society in which spiritual, social, and civic participation were deeply intertwined. The architecture of Olympia evolved over time to accommodate growing crowds and expanding events. Stone seating replaced wooden bleachers, treasuries housed offerings from city-states, and additional altars and temples were constructed to honor gods beyond Zeus and Hera. The physical space of Olympia reflected the cultural priorities of the Greeks' reverence for the divine, admiration of human achievement, and celebration of civic identity. Every building, every pathway, and every altar served to reinforce the interconnectedness of religious observance, athletic excellence, and social cohesion. The visual arts flourished alongside athletic development. Sculptures of victorious athletes captured the idealized human form, emphasizing symmetry, balance, and muscular strength. Pottery depicted scenes of competition, offering a glimpse into the movements, attire, and rituals associated with the events. These artistic representations were not mere decoration, they reinforced cultural ideals, commemorated victories, and provided a lasting record of human skill and aspiration. Through art, the values celebrated at Olympia were transmitted to future generations, creating continuity and a sense of historical memory. The economic dimension of the games continued to grow. Markets surrounding the sanctuary offered food, crafts, and souvenirs, supporting artisans and merchants from across the Greek world. The festival provided opportunities for exchange not only of goods but of ideas, fostering connections between distant regions. Visitors brought news, innovations, and cultural practices, allowing Olympia to serve as a hub of communication and exchange. The Games thus functioned as both a religious and civic institution, influencing social, economic, and cultural life across the Mediterranean. Athletic preparation became increasingly scientific, even in these early centuries. Trainers and mentors observed the performance of young athletes, refining techniques in running, throwing, jumping, and wrestling. Diet, rest, and exercise were carefully managed, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of the human body and its capabilities. Competitors learned to cultivate endurance, speed, strength, and precision, recognizing that success depended on more than natural talent alone. This structured approach to preparation contributed to the high level of skill and discipline displayed at the festival. The moral and ethical dimensions of competition were continuously emphasized. Victories were celebrated not only for physical achievement, but for adherence to the principles of fairness, respect, and honor. Cheating or unsportsmanlike behavior was considered offensive not only to human observers, but also to the gods themselves. Athletes were expected to demonstrate courage, humility, and restraint, reflecting the philosophical belief that excellence encompassed both the body and the character. The Games, therefore, served as a practical classroom in ethics, where young men learned the virtues that defined Greek society. The list of Olympic victors, carefully maintained over generations, served as a historical record connecting past and present. Athletes who achieved victory entered a continuum of memory, their names celebrated in inscriptions, poetry, and oral tradition. This recording of achievement emphasized the lasting importance of human endeavor and reinforced the cultural value of the Games. Fame, honor, and recognition were inseparable from the act of competing, creating a cycle in which effort, skill, and moral integrity were remembered long after the festival concluded. The Games also facilitated philosophical reflection and intellectual discourse. Observers, poets, and scholars analyzed the performances, considering questions of human potential, fairness, and ethical conduct. The festival became a space where ideas about physical and moral excellence could be explored in a real-world setting. Competition provided a tangible demonstration of concepts that philosophers had long debated, from courage and discipline to the relationship between effort and reward. In this way, the Olympics functioned as both a physical and intellectual institution, linking body, mind, and society. Athletic innovation continued alongside the evolution of events. Techniques in running, jumping, throwing, wrestling, and boxing were refined through experimentation and observation. Competitors learned to optimize movement, balance, and timing, enhancing performance while minimizing injury. These developments reflected a broader Greek fascination with knowledge, observation, and the study of natural principles. The physical sciences and philosophy were intertwined, with the Games serving as a living laboratory for understanding human capability and the principles of motion, force, and endurance. Social cohesion was reinforced through the shared experience of the festival. Athletes, spectators, priests, and city-state representatives participated in a structured and ritualized environment that emphasized cooperation, respect, and communal identity. The sacred truce ensured that the festival remained a neutral space, allowing citizens from rival polities to interact peacefully. In this way, the Games functioned as a stabilizing force within Greek society, demonstrating the potential of shared cultural practices to promote harmony and understanding. The cultural significance of the Olympics extended beyond the immediate festival. Artistic representations, historical records, and philosophical reflections ensured that the ideals celebrated at Olympia were transmitted across generations. Victory, discipline, honor, and devotion were encoded into the memory of the Greek world, creating a tradition that shaped social norms, inspired civic pride, and influenced the development of Western culture. The festival's impact was both immediate and enduring, affecting the lives of those who attended directly and leaving a lasting legacy for future generations. Even as the festival grew in scale and complexity, The core principles of the games remained constant: honor the gods, celebrate human excellence, and create a space for ethical competition. Athletes trained, competed, and offered prayers. Spectators observed, reflected, and shared in the collective experience. The combination of physical skill, moral conduct, and religious devotion ensured that the festival was more than entertainment. It was a profound expression of cultural identity, communal values, and the pursuit of excellence. As the first centuries of the Olympic Games unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the festival was more than a collection of athletic contests. It was a lens through which the Greeks understood themselves, their society, and their place in the world. The earliest participants, including the modest cook Koroibos, had perhaps no conception of the vast historical influence their races would eventually symbolize. They were drawn simply by curiosity, devotion, or ambition, yet their presence initiated a tradition that would endure for centuries. Over time, the Games grew into a reflection of the cultural, religious, and political life of ancient Greece. Travel to Olympia remained a slow, sometimes arduous process. Roads were rough, and travelers had to plan for days or even weeks of journeying, bringing food, water, and supplies. Small inns and resting places were scattered along the paths, offering modest accommodation for those moving toward the sanctuary. For the more distant city-states, the trip could take weeks, requiring careful planning and coordination. Families often accompanied young athletes, ensuring their safety and providing encouragement along the way. This journey, undertaken with both care and devotion, became part of the festival experience, a physical and symbolic preparation for the trials of the Games themselves. Upon arrival, the sacred grove of Olympia offered a serene and contemplative space. Olive trees cast long shadows over altars and shrines, their silver-green leaves whispering in the breeze. Here, visitors could pause and reflect, offering prayers or simply absorbing the sacred atmosphere. Small streams and pathways meandered through the sanctuary, allowing quiet walks before the onset of the festival's more active events. This calm, measured rhythm of arrival, preparation, and observation was essential, reminding participants that the Games were not merely about competition, but about joining in a shared ritual of reverence, honor, and celebration. The training of athletes reflected the holistic Greek ideal of a rite, a concept encompassing both physical excellence and moral virtue. Young men were instructed not only in running, wrestling, or throwing, but also in self-control, respect for others, and adherence to ritual norms. Victory without virtue was considered hollow, and athletes who behaved dishonorably risked social and religious censure. Training spaces, often open-air gymnasiums or shaded courtyards, provided an environment in which physical exertion and ethical instruction coexisted, reinforcing the interconnectedness of body, mind, and spirit that the Games were meant to exemplify. Athletic events, though diverse, were unified by a shared focus on demonstrating human skill and resilience. The stadion race, the original and central contest, tested speed, stamina, and determination. The diaulos and dolichos challenged endurance and strategy, requiring careful pacing and mental focus. Wrestling demanded both strength and technique, while boxing highlighted courage and resilience under pressure. The pentathlon, combining multiple events, symbolized the Greek ideal of a well-rounded individual capable of excelling in diverse domains. Each event was both a practical demonstration of physical capability and a symbolic representation of broader cultural values. The inclusion of equestrian events marked a shift toward broader social and political display. Chariot races, for instance, required significant resources as the breeding, training, and upkeep of horses were costly. Victories in these contests were celebrated not only for the skill of the driver, but also as a reflection of the wealth, influence, and sophistication of the sponsoring city-state. Such events added a new dimension to the festival, intertwining athletic competition with status, prestige, and civic pride. They also demonstrated the game's capacity to accommodate a variety of human ambitions, from humble personal achievement to grand public display. Spectators, too, played a vital role in shaping the festival. Families, elders, merchants, and travelers from across the Greek world observed the competitions, offering applause, admiration, and moral reinforcement. While decorum was expected, the presence of an engaged audience contributed to the ritual significance of the games. Observing athletic excellence provided both entertainment and instruction, reinforcing ideals of discipline, courage, and ethical conduct. The spectators themselves became part of the moral and cultural ecosystem of the festival, their presence underscoring the communal importance of the events. Religious observance remained inseparable from athletic activity. Sacrifices at the altars of Zeus and Hera were performed with meticulous attention, each ritual gesture carrying symbolic weight. Priestesses and priests guided the ceremonies, ensuring that offerings were appropriate and prayers properly spoken. Athletes often participated in smaller personal acts of devotion, such as fasting, meditation, or private prayers. This combination of public and private ritual underscored the sacred dimension of the games, reminding all participants that success was ultimately a gift of the divine, contingent upon both effort and favor. The social and political dimensions of the games also continued to evolve. City-states recognized the festival as an arena for displaying civic virtue, discipline, and cultural refinement. Sponsorship of athletes, commissioning of statues, and investment in infrastructure reflected civic ambition and strategic planning. Victories by athletes were celebrated as evidence of the city-state's collective strength and moral integrity. At the same time, the sacred truce allowed for temporary peace, offering a neutral space where diplomacy and social exchange could occur. This dual function of the festival, both competitive and reconciliatory, highlighted its unique place within Greek culture. Cultural expression flourished alongside athletic activity. Sculptors, painters, and poets created enduring representations of the festival, capturing both physical achievement and moral virtue. Statues of victorious athletes immortalized form, balance, and power, while pottery and reliefs depicted the events with meticulous detail. Poets composed odes celebrating heroism, discipline, and piety, blending narrative, instruction, and commemoration. These artistic and literary expressions reinforced the cultural significance of the games, ensuring that the ideals of Olympia were transmitted across time and space. Women, though largely excluded from most events, contributed to the spiritual and social life of the festival. Priestesses supervised sacred ceremonies, maintaining altars and ensuring proper ritual observance. Women of participating city-states offered encouragement and hospitality, supporting athletes and contributing to the communal atmosphere. In the Heraian Games, women were permitted to compete in footraces, honoring Hera and reflecting the complementary roles of men and women within Greek society. These contributions, though often less visible, were integral to the spiritual and social integrity of the festival. The Olympics also became a space for intellectual exchange. Philosophers and scholars observed competitions, analyzed techniques, and considered the ethical and social implications of athletic achievement. The festival offered a living laboratory for reflection on human capability, discipline, and morality. Poets and storytellers, similarly, used the festival as inspiration, weaving accounts of triumph, perseverance, and piety into narratives that reinforced cultural ideals. In this way, the games bridged the physical and intellectual, demonstrating the interconnectedness of action, reflection, and moral education. The evolution of facilities at Olympia mirrored the growth of the festival itself. Stone seating replaced temporary wooden structures, altars and temples expanded, and treasuries housed offerings from across the Greek world. Pathways, gates, and ceremonial spaces were constructed to accommodate the growing crowds. These developments not only facilitated practical logistics, but also conveyed symbolic messages of permanence, reverence, and civic pride. The physical landscape of Olympia became a reflection of Greek cultural values, embodying the principles of honor, discipline, and communal celebration that defined the games. Economic activity intertwined with festival life. Merchants and artisans traveled to Olympia to sell goods, from food and drink to crafted items and commemorative objects. Markets flourished around the sanctuary, creating opportunities for trade, cultural exchange, and social interaction. The festival thus functioned as a hub of economic and social activity, extending its influence beyond the sacred grounds. Visitors carried knowledge, ideas, and goods back to their city, states, spreading the cultural influence of Olympia throughout the Greek world. Athletic training became increasingly sophisticated, emphasizing preparation, strategy, and resilience. Coaches guided athletes through progressive exercises in running, jumping, throwing, and wrestling, cultivating both skill and endurance. Rest, diet, and recovery were carefully managed to optimize performance. The disciplined preparation of athletes reflected broader cultural values, emphasizing perseverance, self-control, and the pursuit of excellence. Victory at Olympia was therefore the result of careful cultivation of body and mind, a testament to both natural ability and sustained effort. Ethical conduct remained central to the festival. Athletes were expected to demonstrate courage, fairness, and humility. Cheating, violence, or disrespect was condemned both socially and spiritually. Victories were celebrated not solely for their physical achievement, but for the demonstration of virtue in action. The festival, therefore, functioned as both a competitive and educational institution, teaching lessons about morality, discipline, and communal responsibility through the medium of athletic performance. Records of victors reinforced the continuity and historical significance of the games. Lists of winners, inscribed on stone or recorded orally, created a sense of enduring legacy. Athletes who achieved victory were immortalized not only in memory, but also in art, poetry, and historical accounts. This documentation connected past, present, and future participants, emphasizing that success at Olympia was both a personal achievement and a contribution to a long tradition. The festival's philosophical significance was equally profound. Observers reflected on the balance of human effort, moral virtue, and divine favor, considering the broader implications of competition. Athletes' performances demonstrated principles of discipline, resilience, and ethical conduct in tangible form. The Games offered a space in which theoretical concepts of excellence, justice, and honor could be observed and analyzed in real time, reinforcing the interconnectedness of thought, action, and cultural identity. In these ways, the Olympic Games, rooted in a simple footrace centuries earlier, evolved into a complex and enduring institution. They reflected the values of Greek society, facilitated cultural exchange, and promoted moral education. They created a rhythm of time, linking generations through the cycle of the Olympiad. They offered a space for athletic achievement, artistic expression, social cohesion, political display, and religious devotion. From the first race of Koroibos to the grand festivals of the 5th century BCE, the Olympics became a living testament to human aspiration, communal identity, and the pursuit of excellence. As the Olympic Games grew in prominence, Olympia itself became more than just a gathering place for athletes. It became a center of cultural memory, a living archive of achievements, and a symbol of Greek identity. The first recorded footrace of Koroibos, though seemingly simple, had initiated a cycle that reverberated through centuries. With each Olympiad, the festival's reputation spread, attracting visitors not only from nearby regions, but from distant cities, states, islands, and even territories on the fringes of the Greek world. The sense of anticipation, the preparation, and the journey itself became integral components of the festival experience. Traveling to Olympia required careful planning and patience. Roads were often little more than dirt paths, winding through forests, valleys, and hills. Travelers needed provisions for themselves and their animals, sometimes journeying for days or weeks to reach the sacred grounds. City-states encouraged participation by sending delegations of athletes and supporters, offering guidance and logistical assistance along the way. Even the journey itself was a form of preparation, a symbolic passage toward both physical and spiritual challenges. Families and mentors accompanied young athletes, sharing the responsibility for guidance, moral instruction, and safety. The approach to Olympia was marked by the sacred olive groves that lined the sanctuary. The trees, ancient even then, cast long, calming shadows over the pathways, creating a space that invited contemplation and reverence. Altars, shrines, and small temples dotted the landscape, signaling to all visitors that this was a place apart from ordinary life. Here, athletes paused to offer prayers, make sacrifices, or simply reflect on the significance of their participation. This moment of quiet preparation before the intensity of competition underscored the holistic nature of the Games. The festival was as much about spiritual cultivation as it was about athletic prowess. The training of athletes became a highly structured endeavor. From childhood, boys who aspired to compete at Olympia were instructed in running, wrestling, boxing, and other physical disciplines. Mentors and trainers emphasized not only technique and endurance, but also moral virtues such as courage, self-control, and fairness. Victories achieved through dishonorable means were considered invalid, reflecting the belief that true excellence encompassed both body and character. Training facilities, such as gymnasiums and open-air courts, provided spaces where discipline, skill, and ethical instruction coexisted, reinforcing the cultural ideal of arete, human excellence in both physical and moral dimensions. The stadion race remained the centerpiece of the festival, but additional events gradually enriched the program. The diaulos, a race twice the length of the stadion, tested endurance, while the dolichos, a long-distance run, required stamina and strategic pacing. Wrestling and boxing emphasized both strength and skill, demanding careful technique, balance, and perseverance. The pentathlon, a composite of 5 different events, became a showcase of versatility, reflecting the Greek ideal of a well-rounded individual capable of excelling in multiple domains. Each event carried symbolic significance, illustrating the virtues that the Greeks most admired: discipline, courage, precision, and resilience. Equestrian contests were added as the festival evolved, highlighting both human skill and social status. Chariot races, in particular, required significant investment as the breeding, training, and maintenance of horses were costly. Victories in these contests were celebrated as much for the prestige of the city, state, or sponsor as for the skill of the driver. In contrast, footraces and wrestling events allowed broader participation among free citizens, balancing social accessibility with the demonstration of wealth and power in equestrian sports. These events highlighted the dual character of the Olympics as both a civic and sacred institution, blending personal achievement with collective honor. Spectators played a vital role in shaping the festival's atmosphere. Families, elders, travelers, and dignitaries observed competitions with attention and respect, reinforcing the moral and cultural framework of the Games. Their presence amplified the significance of the events, providing recognition for athletes and modeling admiration for virtue. Poets and storytellers performed for the crowd, recounting tales of heroism, divine favor, and moral excellence. Music, song, and rhythm accompanied athletic performance, creating an immersive experience that blended entertainment, instruction, and ritual. Religious practice remained central to the festival. The Temple of Zeus, with its monumental statue by Phidias, symbolized the divine presence that watched over every event. Altars, treasuries, and shrines dotted the sanctuary, offering spaces for sacrifice and reflection. Priests and priestesses oversaw rituals, ensuring proper adherence to tradition. Athletes often engaged in personal devotional acts, fasting, meditation, or prayer, acknowledging that victory depended not only on human effort, but also on divine favor. This integration of the spiritual and physical dimensions reinforced the sacred character of the games, reminding participants that human excellence was inseparable from ethical and religious conduct. Political dimensions of the festival became increasingly pronounced. States recognized the games as an opportunity to display civic virtue, military discipline, and cultural sophistication. Victories by athletes were interpreted as evidence of a city-state's collective strength and moral integrity. Leaders sponsored training, commissioned statues, and funded travel for competitors, linking athletic achievement to civic prestige. The sacred truce, or ikacharya, allowed temporary cessation of hostilities, creating a neutral environment where diplomacy, social exchange, and observation could take place. The festival thus served multiple functions: religious, athletic, social, and political. Artistic and intellectual expression flourished alongside athletic activity. Sculptors immortalized victorious athletes in marble and bronze, capturing the beauty, strength, and idealized proportions of the human body. Pottery and reliefs depicted events with meticulous attention to detail, providing a visual record of techniques, gestures, and ceremonial contexts. Poets composed odes celebrating achievement, valor, and piety, reinforcing moral and cultural ideals. Philosophers observed the competitions, reflecting on the ethical and social implications of human effort, fairness, and the pursuit of excellence. In these ways, the games became both a practical and symbolic laboratory for understanding human potential. Women, though largely excluded from most events, played important spiritual and social roles. Priestesses maintained sacred spaces and supervised religious ceremonies, ensuring proper ritual observance. Women of city-states provided encouragement and hospitality to athletes, supporting training, preparation, and journeying. The Heraean Games allowed women to compete in footraces honoring Hera, emphasizing complementary roles in the religious and social fabric of the festival. Even in exclusion, women contributed to the ethical and spiritual integrity of Olympia, reminding all participants of the interconnectedness of life, ritual, and community. The facilities of Olympia evolved as the festival expanded. Stone seating replaced temporary wooden structures, providing more comfortable and permanent arrangements for spectators. Treasuries and temples reflected the growing wealth and influence of participating city-states, housing offerings, votive gifts, and commemorative objects. Pathways and ceremonial spaces were carefully designed to accommodate increasing crowds while reinforcing ritual order. The physical landscape of Olympia became a tangible representation of the cultural priorities of the Greeks: reverence for the divine, admiration of human excellence, and the cultivation of communal identity. Economic activity was interwoven with the festival. Markets surrounded the sanctuary, offering food, drink, crafts, and commemorative goods. Artisans and merchants traveled from across the Greek world, providing opportunities for trade and cultural exchange. Visitors returned home carrying not only souvenirs, but also knowledge, ideas, and stories, spreading the influence of Olympia far beyond its physical boundaries. The Games thus functioned as a hub of economic, social, and cultural interaction, reflecting the interconnectedness of Greek life and the festival's role in reinforcing shared identity. Training became increasingly sophisticated. Athletes were guided through progressive exercises, emphasizing both skill and endurance. Techniques were refined through observation and experimentation, allowing competitors to optimize movement and performance. Rest, diet, and recovery were carefully managed, reflecting an early understanding of human physiology and psychology. Victory depended on a combination of natural talent, disciplined preparation, and strategic thinking, highlighting the holistic nature of the festival and its emphasis on well-rounded excellence. Ethical conduct was continuously emphasized. Cheating, arrogance, or unsportsmanlike behavior was socially and religiously condemned. Victories were celebrated not only for physical achievement, but for adherence to moral principles. The Games served as a practical classroom in virtue, demonstrating through action the ideals of courage, discipline, and respect. Athletes were models of excellence, inspiring spectators and reinforcing communal values. Records of victors connected generations. Names, inscribed on stone or recited orally, immortalized achievement and created a sense of historical continuity. Athletes who triumphed became part of a living tradition, their deeds commemorated in art, poetry, and civic memory. Fame, honor, and legacy were inseparable from participation, reinforcing the moral and social dimensions of athletic success. The festival's philosophical significance was profound. Observers considered questions of human potential, ethical behavior, and the relationship between effort and reward. The games provided a tangible context in which ideals of justice, discipline, and excellence could be observed, discussed, and evaluated. The combination of physical demonstration and intellectual reflection reinforced the intertwined nature of body, mind, and society in Greek culture. The Olympic Games, rooted in a simple footrace centuries earlier, evolved into a complex, enduring institution. They reflected Greek values, facilitated cultural exchange, and promoted moral and social education. The 4-year cycle of the Olympiad became a rhythm of communal life, linking generations through shared experience and historical memory. From the first victor, Koroibos, to the sprawling festivals of later centuries, the Olympics embodied human aspiration, civic identity, and divine reverence. As the centuries unfolded, the Olympic Games grew into a festival of extraordinary scale and significance, evolving far beyond the simple footrace that had marked the earliest recorded competition. By the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, Olympia had become a destination not only for athletes, but also for spectators, dignitaries, priests, and scholars from across the Greek world. The arrival of these visitors created a rhythm of anticipation that began long before the festival itself. Weeks in advance, city-states sent delegations to prepare, organize accommodations, and arrange for both athletic and ceremonial participation. The journey to Olympia was itself a formative experience. Travelers crossed mountains, rivers, and plains, moving slowly under the sun and through the shadowed groves that lined the sanctuary. Families accompanied young athletes, ensuring both safety and moral guidance, while mentors oversaw the physical conditioning that would determine success. Along the way, travelers encountered local communities, exchanged stories, and absorbed the landscape and culture of each region they traversed. This journey was a symbolic preparation, a transition from ordinary life to the sacred space where human and divine realms intersected. The sanctuary of Olympia offered a tranquil yet reverent environment. Olive groves whispered with the wind, sacred streams meandered along quiet pathways, and temples and altars marked the presence of the divine. The Temple of Zeus, with its massive chryselephantine statue, loomed as a powerful reminder that the games were conducted under divine observation. Athletes, spectators, and dignitaries alike were enveloped in a sense of solemnity, understanding that their actions, words, and intentions were part of a larger moral and spiritual order. Quiet reflection, small prayers, and ritual purification were all part of preparing for the intensity of the festival. Athletic training had become a meticulous practice, reflecting the holistic ideal of a rite. Young men were instructed not only in running, wrestling, and boxing, but also in philosophy, ethics, and moral conduct. Trainers emphasized discipline, perseverance, and fairness, teaching that success was meaningful only when coupled with virtuous behavior. Gymnasiums provided open spaces for practice, while shaded courtyards and quiet retreats allowed time for contemplation. Athletes learned to balance exertion with rest, to control emotions under pressure, and to respect both competitors and spectators. Excellence was thus understood as a synthesis of body, mind, and spirit, a reflection of cultural ideals that valued harmony, strength, and moral integrity. The stadion race continued to hold pride of place among Olympic events, symbolizing the essence of human speed and endurance. However, additional events were now firmly established, providing diverse challenges for athletes. The diaulos required careful pacing over twice the stadium's length, testing stamina and strategy. The dolichos, a long-distance race, emphasized endurance and resilience. Wrestling demanded technique, leverage, and mental acuity, while boxing and pankration, an early form of mixed combat, tested both courage and tenacity. The pentathlon combined running, jumping, discus, javelin, and wrestling, demonstrating versatility and the capacity for mastery in multiple disciplines. Each event embodied ideals of preparation, effort, and moral discipline, reinforcing the broader social and ethical values of Greek society. Equestrian events became a symbol of wealth and social status, reflecting both individual skill and civic prestige. Chariot races, in particular, required significant resources, as horses had to be bred, trained, and maintained with care. Victories in these events were celebrated not only for the driver's abilities, but for the accomplishments and status of the sponsoring city-states. Footraces and wrestling events, in contrast, were accessible to citizens of diverse backgrounds, balancing the display of wealth with recognition of individual effort. The diversity of events reinforced the Olympics' role as a microcosm of Greek society, combining personal achievement with civic and religious significance. Spectators were central to the atmosphere and significance of the Games. Families, elders, and travelers observed contests with respect, admiration, and moral engagement. Their presence elevated the performance of athletes, providing both recognition and accountability. Stories, poetry, and song accompanied the competitions, creating a multisensory experience that combined entertainment, moral instruction, and ritual observance. The audience, in this way, became an integral part of the festival, embodying communal values and reinforcing the social and ethical dimensions of athletic competition. Religious ritual remained inseparable from the athletic contests. Sacrifices to Zeus, Hera, and other deities were performed with careful attention to tradition and symbolism. Priests and priestesses guided ceremonies, while athletes engaged in personal acts of devotion, offering prayers, fasting, or other forms of ritual preparation. These practices underscored the sacred dimension of the Games, reinforcing the belief that human achievement was intertwined with divine favor. Every race, throw, and match was both a physical contest and a moral act, a reflection of the harmony between human effort and spiritual devotion. The political implications of the Olympics grew alongside their religious and cultural importance. City-states recognized that athletic victories could enhance prestige, demonstrate civic virtue, and reflect the moral discipline of their citizens. Leaders invested in training programs, sponsored travel, and commissioned statues or monuments to commemorate success. Victories were celebrated as evidence of a city-state's collective excellence, and the sacred truce allowed temporary peace for safe travel and participation. The Games became a delicate balance of competition, diplomacy, and civic pride, demonstrating the ability of shared cultural practices to unify otherwise independent and often rivalrous communities. Art and intellectual inquiry flourished in conjunction with the festival. Sculptors captured the form, movement, and strength of athletes in marble and bronze, preserving both physical and symbolic ideals. Reliefs and pottery depicted events with remarkable detail, providing insight into techniques, gestures, and ceremonial contexts. Poets and storytellers composed odes that celebrated courage, endurance, and moral virtue, while philosophers and observers reflected on the ethical and social implications of athletic competition. The Games were thus a living laboratory of culture, where physical action, moral reflection, and aesthetic representation converged to embody Greek ideals. Women, although largely excluded from most events, contributed meaningfully to the spiritual and social life of the festival. Priestesses oversaw sacred rituals, maintained altars, and ensured that religious obligations were properly fulfilled. Women of the city-states supported athletes by offering guidance, care, and encouragement. In the Heraean Games, female athletes competed in footraces honoring Hera, demonstrating the complementary roles of men and women within Greek society. Even in limited participation, women's contributions reinforced the ethical and spiritual fabric of Olympia, highlighting the interconnectedness of the community and the sacred dimensions of the festival. The physical landscape of Olympia evolved to accommodate growing numbers of participants and spectators. Stone seating replaced wooden benches, providing more permanent arrangements for observation. Treasuries and temples were constructed or expanded, housing offerings from city-states across Greece. Pathways, altars, and ceremonial spaces were carefully arranged to facilitate processions, rituals, and competition. The architecture of Olympia reflected cultural priorities, emphasizing reverence for the gods, admiration of human achievement, and the importance of communal participation. Every structure was designed not only for practical function, but also for symbolic resonance, reinforcing the moral, spiritual, and civic dimensions of the games. Economic activity thrived in conjunction with the festival. Merchants traveled to Olympia to sell food, crafts, and commemorative items. Artisans produced pottery, sculptures, and decorative objects depicting athletes, gods, and the events of the games. Markets created opportunities for trade, cultural exchange, and social interaction, allowing the festival to function as a hub of both commerce and culture. Visitors returned to their city, states carrying not only goods but also stories, ideas, and knowledge, spreading the influence of Olympia throughout the Greek world. Athletic preparation became increasingly sophisticated over time. Trainers refined techniques in running, jumping, throwing, and wrestling, emphasizing efficiency, precision, and endurance. Rest and diet were carefully managed, reflecting an early understanding of physiology and the principles of performance. Athletes learned to pace themselves, conserve energy, and apply strategy to competition. The meticulous cultivation of skill and resilience demonstrated a profound appreciation for the interplay between natural ability, disciplined training, and strategic thinking. Ethical conduct remained central to the experience of the games. Cheating, violence, or arrogance was condemned both socially and spiritually. Victories were celebrated not only for physical accomplishment, but also for the demonstration of moral integrity. The festival functioned as a practical lesson in virtue, showing through action the values of courage, perseverance, and fairness. Athletes were exemplars for their communities, inspiring admiration, respect, and emulation. Documentation of victors provided continuity and historical memory. Names were inscribed on stone, recorded in poetry, and recounted in stories, creating a sense of connection across generations. Athletes who triumphed became part of a living tradition, their achievements celebrated long after the festival ended. This preservation of memory reinforced the moral, social, and cultural significance of participation, ensuring that the ideals of Olympia were transmitted to future generations. Philosophical reflection was a natural extension of the festival. Observers considered questions of human capability, fairness, and ethical behavior. The games offered tangible examples of principles long debated by thinkers: the balance of effort and reward, the cultivation of virtue, and the relationship between human action and divine favor. In this way, the Olympics became not only a celebration of physical achievement, but also a framework for exploring ethical, intellectual, and cultural ideals. Through these centuries, the Olympics evolved from a single footrace into a multifaceted institution. They reflected Greek values, facilitated cultural exchange, promoted ethical and social education, and created a rhythm of life marked by the 4-year Olympiad. The festival combined athletic excellence, religious devotion, civic pride, artistic expression, and philosophical reflection, creating a comprehensive expression of Greek civilization. From the humble beginnings of Koroibos of victory to the grand spectacles of later centuries, Olympia became a symbol of human aspiration, communal identity, and reverence for the divine. As the Olympic Games continued to develop through the centuries, the sanctuary of Olympia became more than a place for athletic contests. It became a spiritual, cultural, and political center, a space where human effort, civic pride, and divine reverence converged. The first Olympiad, which had begun with a simple foot race, had grown into a complex institution, deeply embedded in the social and religious fabric of Greek life. By the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, the Games were firmly established as a defining feature of Hellenic culture, drawing participants, spectators, and dignitaries from across the Greek world. The preparation for each Olympiad was meticulous. Weeks before the festival, city-states dispatched delegations of athletes, trainers, and support staff. Young competitors traveled long distances, crossing mountains, rivers, and plains to reach Olympia. Their journeys were filled with anticipation and reflection. Along the way, they practiced, strengthened bonds with mentors, and absorbed the landscapes and cultures of the regions they traversed. The journey itself became an extension of the festival, a symbolic passage from everyday life into the sacred and extraordinary world of Olympia. Upon arrival, the sanctuary offered a serene yet solemn environment. Ancient olive groves swayed gently in the wind, casting dappled shadows over altars, temples, and sacred pathways. The Temple of Zeus, a monumental structure of white marble, dominated the site, housing a colossal statue of the god, crafted from gold and ivory by the renowned sculptor Phidias. This awe-inspiring figure served as a reminder that the Games were conducted under divine observation. Athletes, spectators, and priests alike were enveloped in a sense of reverence, understanding that their actions were part of a larger cosmic and moral order. Athletic preparation was intensive and highly structured. From childhood, athletes trained rigorously under the guidance of skilled mentors. Physical exercises included running, jumping, wrestling, and throwing, each tailored to the specific demands of the competition. But training was not limited to the body. Athletes were instructed in ethics, self-control, and respect for the rules and traditions of the Games. Victory without honor was meaningless. Gymnasiums provided spaces where discipline, skill, and moral instruction intertwined, ensuring that participants embodied the Greek ideal of arete, excellence in both physical ability and ethical conduct. The events themselves had evolved into a carefully balanced program. The stadion race, the original foot race, remained central, symbolizing speed, endurance, and determination. The diaulos and dolichos tested stamina and strategy over greater distances, requiring mental focus and physical control. Wrestling, boxing, and the pankration emphasized technique, strength, and courage, with athletes demonstrating both resilience and tactical thinking. The pentathlon, combining running, jumping, discus, javelin, and wrestling, celebrated versatility, rewarding those who could excel in multiple disciplines. Each event embodied ideals of preparation, skill, and moral integrity, reflecting the broader values of Greek society. Equestrian events became increasingly prominent, highlighting both human skill and social status. Chariot races were particularly prestigious, requiring significant resources for horses, training, and equipment. Victories in these events were celebrated not only for the driver's talent, but also for the civic prestige of the sponsoring city-state. Foot races and wrestling events remained accessible to free citizens, balancing the display of wealth and status in equestrian contests with the recognition of individual merit and effort. This balance reinforced the multifaceted nature of the Olympics, combining personal achievement, social hierarchy, and civic pride. Spectators were integral to the festival. Families, dignitaries, and travelers observed competitions with reverence, offering admiration and moral support. Their presence elevated athletic performance, created a communal atmosphere, and reinforced ethical behavior. Storytellers, poets, and musicians performed for the crowd, weaving tales of heroism, divine favor, and moral virtue into the rhythm of the Games. This multisensory experience, combining sound, movement, and narrative, immersed all present in the festival's spiritual and cultural significance. Religious ritual remained central. Sacrifices to Zeus, Hera, and other deities were conducted with meticulous attention to detail. Priests and priestesses guided ceremonies, while athletes offered personal prayers, fasting, or other devotional acts. Every race, throw, or contest was conducted within a sacred framework, emphasizing the interdependence of human effort and divine will. The presence of gods was felt in every aspect of the festival, from the solemnity of altars to the precise order of events, reminding all participants that excellence was both a human and spiritual pursuit. The political implications of the games became more pronounced. States recognized that victories could enhance prestige, demonstrate civic virtue, and reflect social discipline. Leaders sponsored training programs, commissioned statues, and funded travel for athletes, linking success at Olympia to political and cultural influence. The sacred truce, or ikecharia, allowed temporary suspension of hostilities, creating a neutral space for diplomacy and interaction. The games thus operated on multiple levels: religious, athletic, social, and political, serving as a platform for negotiation, celebration, and collective identity. Art and intellectual life flourished in parallel with athletic competition. Sculptors immortalized athletes in marble and bronze, capturing idealized forms that emphasized balance, strength, and grace. Reliefs, pottery, and frescoes depicted events with remarkable detail, preserving gestures, attire, and ceremonial context for future generations. Poets composed odes to victors, celebrating their courage, skill, and moral virtue. Philosophers reflected on the ethical implications of competition, observing the interplay of effort, fairness, and divine favor. The festival became a living laboratory, integrating physical, aesthetic, and intellectual dimensions into a unified cultural experience. Women's contributions, though often indirect, were essential to the spiritual and social life of Olympia. Priestesses maintained sacred spaces, supervised rituals, and ensured proper observance of religious customs. Women of city-states offered care, guidance, and support to athletes, while the Heraean Games provided opportunities for female athletic participation in races honoring Hera. Even in limited roles, women reinforced the moral and spiritual integrity of the festival, ensuring that the community, sacred practice, and cultural values remained interconnected. The architecture of Olympia reflected both practical and symbolic needs. Stone seating replaced wooden benches, accommodating growing crowds, while treasuries and temples housed offerings and commemorative objects from across Greece. Ceremonial pathways, altars, and processional spaces were carefully arranged to enhance ritual order and visual grandeur. Each structure served a dual purpose, facilitating practical logistics and conveying symbolic meaning. Olympia's physical landscape became a testament to civic pride, religious devotion, and the cultural values of the Greeks. Embodying the festival's complex role in society, economic activity thrived around the games. Markets offered food, drink, crafts, and commemorative goods, supporting artisans, merchants, and local communities. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as visitors shared ideas, news, and knowledge. Olympia thus became a hub of social, economic, and cultural interaction, extending the influence of the games far beyond their immediate physical boundaries. The festival stimulated creativity, commerce, and community, reinforcing its role as a central institution in Greek life. Training practices became increasingly sophisticated. Athletes were instructed in precise techniques, balancing strength, endurance, and strategy. Rest, diet, and recovery were carefully managed, reflecting an early understanding of human physiology and performance optimization. The cultivation of skill, resilience, and mental focus demonstrated the Greeks' holistic approach to athletic preparation, in which natural ability, disciplined effort, and strategic intelligence were all essential. Ethical conduct remained central. Cheating, aggression, or disrespect was condemned both socially and spiritually. Victories were valued not only for physical achievement, but for demonstration of moral virtue. The games provided a practical framework for learning courage, fairness, and perseverance, creating role models for communities and embedding ethical norms into the festival experience. Historical records preserve the continuity and legacy of the games. Names of victors were inscribed on stone, celebrated in poetry, and remembered orally. Athletes' achievements became part of a collective memory, linking past, present, and future participants. This documentation ensured that the ideals of Olympia, excellence, virtue, and devotion, were transmitted through generations, maintaining the festival's significance across centuries. The philosophical dimension of the games was profound. Observers reflected on human potential, ethical behavior, and the relationship between effort and reward. The physical contests provided tangible illustrations of abstract principles, allowing philosophers and spectators alike to explore questions of justice, excellence, and virtue. In this way, the Olympics served as both a practical and intellectual forum, integrating action, reflection, and moral instruction. Over time, the Olympics became a defining feature of Greek identity. Participation and observation fostered communal cohesion, reinforcing social norms, civic pride, and cultural continuity. The cycle of the Olympiad created a temporal rhythm, linking generations and providing a framework for historical memory. From the earliest footrace to the multi-event festivals of later centuries, Olympia symbolized human aspiration, communal achievement, and reverence for the divine. By the Hellenistic period, the games had reached unprecedented scale. City-states competed not only for glory but also for prestige, with monumental statues, treasuries, and dedications marking victories. Travel to Olympia was more organized, with guest accommodations, official guides, and elaborate processions. The festival attracted scholars, poets, and philosophers who observed and documented events, enriching the intellectual and cultural life of the games. The sacred truce facilitated safe travel and fostered social and political connections among otherwise rival states, reinforcing Olympia's role as a neutral ground of unity and exchange. Athletic innovation continued to flourish. Techniques in running, throwing, jumping, wrestling, and boxing were refined, with trainers emphasizing efficiency, strategy, and resilience. Methods of preparation, including diet, exercise, and mental conditioning, demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of human potential. The combination of physical mastery, ethical conduct, and strategic intelligence reflected the broader Greek ideal of a well-rounded, disciplined individual capable of excellence in multiple dimensions. Religious rituals remained integral. Sacrifices, prayers, and processions reinforced the divine dimension of the festival, reminding all participants that human achievement was inseparable from moral and spiritual order. Priests, priestesses, and athletes alike engaged in acts of devotion, acknowledging that success depended both on effort and divine favor. This sacred framework gave the games a depth beyond physical competition, embedding them firmly in the spiritual and moral life of Greece. The cultural, economic, and political impact of the Olympics continued to expand. Markets thrived, artisans flourished, and visitors returned to their city, states carrying knowledge, stories, and goods. Victories were commemorated with statues, inscriptions, and poetry, reinforcing civic pride and social cohesion. Philosophical and intellectual reflection was intertwined with observation, as spectators considered ethical, strategic, and aesthetic questions prompted by the competitions. Through centuries of growth, the Olympic Games maintained a delicate balance between competition, ethics, spirituality, and civic life. They reflected Greek ideals, connected communities, and created a rhythm of historical memory. Athletes trained and competed under moral and religious guidance. Spectators observed with reverence, and city-states invested in infrastructure, sponsorship, and commemoration. The festival became an enduring symbol of human aspiration, excellence, and cultural identity. Here we pause once more, letting the image of Olympia settle. Quiet olive groves, the soft flow of the Alpheos River, athletes practicing in open-air gymnasiums, priests performing ritual sacrifices, and the murmurs of distant spectators moving through stone pathways. From the humble beginnings of Koroibos' first victory to the grandeur of Hellenistic festivals, the Olympic Games had evolved into a rich tapestry of athletic skill, cultural expression, and spiritual devotion. As the centuries moved forward, Olympia, once a relatively simple sanctuary, had become a monumental center of culture, religion, and athletic tradition. By the late Hellenistic period, the Games were more than just competitions. They were a living chronicle of human ambition, city-state rivalry, religious devotion, and social cohesion. Travelers arriving at the sanctuary were greeted by expansive sacred groves, marble temples gleaming in the sunlight, and the soft murmur of the Alpheos River as it wound its way through the valley. The presence of history was tangible in every stone, every altar, and every path worn smooth by the feet of athletes and pilgrims over centuries. The preparation for each Olympiad had become an elaborate affair, reflecting both the religious and civic importance of the festival. Weeks in advance, delegations from across the Greek world traveled to Olympia with athletes, trainers, and support personnel. These journeys were not purely logistical, they were symbolic. The physical effort required to traverse mountains, rivers, and plains mirrored the preparation needed for the contests themselves. Athletes, often accompanied by families and mentors, trained along the way, practicing their disciplines and reflecting on the moral and ethical lessons of the Games. The journey was as much a part of the festival as the competition itself, a prelude that shaped both the body and the mind. Within the sanctuary, the atmosphere was both serene and charged with expectation. The olive groves provided shade and quiet, allowing visitors to pause for prayer, meditation, or ritual preparation. The temples, particularly the Grand Temple of Zeus, were awe-inspiring, their architecture designed to reflect divine majesty and human aspiration. Inside, the colossal statue of Zeus by Phidias watched over the proceedings, reminding all present that their actions were observed not only by fellow humans but by the gods themselves. Every contest, every gesture, every moment of preparation was suffused with this awareness of divine presence. Training methods for athletes had evolved into highly sophisticated practices. Trainers guided competitors in exercises that enhanced strength, endurance, and technique. Footraces, wrestling, boxing, and pentathlon events demanded a combination of raw power, precise skill, and strategic thinking. Diet, rest, and mental preparation were carefully managed to maximize performance. But training was never purely physical. It was inseparable from moral education. Young athletes were taught discipline, humility, and respect for both their opponents and the gods. Victory without virtue was meaningless, and the ideal competitor embodied both excellence in action and moral integrity. The events themselves had diversified and expanded, yet each retained a connection to the earliest traditions. The stadion race, a sprint of approximately 600 feet, remained central, reflecting the original footrace won by Koroibos. The diaulos and dolichos tested endurance and strategy over longer distances, while wrestling and boxing demanded both strength and technique. The pankration, a combination of wrestling and striking, challenged courage and resilience. The pentathlon, combining running, jumping, discus, javelin, and wrestling, celebrated versatility and the holistic ideal of the Greek athlete. Each event was both a physical trial and a moral exercise, demonstrating the interconnectedness of body, mind, and spirit. Equestrian contests, particularly chariot racing, had become spectacles of wealth and prestige. The breeding, training, and upkeep of horses required considerable resources, making victories in these events symbols of civic power as well as individual skill. Footraces, wrestling, and pentathlon events remained accessible to free citizens, ensuring that personal achievement and merit retained a central place in the festival. The balance between elite display and personal effort exemplified the multifaceted nature of Olympia, a space where human aspiration, social status, and civic identity coexisted. Spectators played a vital role in the character and rhythm of the festival. Families, dignitaries, and ordinary citizens observed competitions with attention and moral engagement. Their reactions, applause, silence, or contemplation, reinforced the ethical dimension of the events, reminding athletes that excellence was recognized not only through victory but through honorable conduct. Storytellers, poets, and musicians contributed to the festival atmosphere, weaving narratives that emphasized heroism, discipline, and divine favor. In this way, the games were both a performance and a moral lesson, experienced collectively by participants and observers alike. Religious ritual remained at the heart of Olympia. Sacrifices to Zeus, Hera, and other gods were conducted with precise attention to tradition. Athletes engaged in personal acts of devotion, offering prayers or fasting in preparation for their contests. Every race, match, and throw was a sacred act, linking human effort to divine will. The festivals were structured so that each athletic endeavor occurred within a ritual framework, emphasizing that physical achievement was inseparable from moral and spiritual excellence. The gods were ever present, shaping both the conduct of the games and the perception of success. The political significance of the games continued to grow. City-states understood that victories at Olympia enhanced civic prestige and reflected the moral and physical discipline of their citizens. Leaders sponsored training programs, funded travel, and commissioned statues or treasuries to commemorate victories. The sacred truce, or ikacharia, provided a temporary suspension of hostilities, allowing safe travel and interaction among rival polities. The Olympics thus served as a neutral ground for diplomacy, social exchange, and the reinforcement of shared Hellenic identity, even amid ongoing political tension. Art and literature flourished alongside athletic competition. Sculptors created statues capturing the idealized human form, emphasizing balance, symmetry, and strength. Reliefs and pottery depicted contests, gestures, and ritual scenes, preserving the visual record of Olympia for generations. Poets composed odes celebrating heroic deeds and moral excellence, while philosophers reflected on the ethical, social, and political implications of competition. The festival functioned as a cultural laboratory, integrating athletic performance, moral education, artistic expression, and philosophical reflection into a unified experience. Women, though largely excluded from most competitions, played essential spiritual and social roles. Priestesses oversaw sacred rituals, maintained altars, and ensured the correct performance of ceremonies. Women from city-states supported athletes through hospitality, guidance, and encouragement. The Heraean Games provided opportunities for female athletic participation, emphasizing the complementary roles of men and women in Greek religious and cultural life. Even in limited visibility, women's involvement reinforced the moral, spiritual, and communal integrity of Olympia. The architecture of Olympia reflected its growing importance. Stone seating replaced wooden benches, accommodating large audiences. Treasuries housed offerings from city-states, while temples and altars expanded to honor multiple deities. Processional pathways and ceremonial spaces facilitated order, reflecting both practical and symbolic priorities. Every architectural element served to reinforce civic pride, spiritual devotion, and the cultural values of the games, creating a landscape that was both functional and meaningful. Economic activity thrived during the festival. Merchants and artisans traveled to Olympia to sell goods ranging from food and drink to crafted items and commemorative objects. Markets flourished, enabling trade, cultural exchange, and the dissemination of ideas. Visitors returned to their home regions carrying stories, souvenirs, and knowledge, extending the influence of the games beyond the sanctuary. The festival became a nexus of cultural, economic, and social interaction, linking communities across the Greek world. Athletic training became increasingly sophisticated. Trainers emphasized precise techniques, balancing strength, speed, endurance, and strategy. Diet and recovery were carefully managed, reflecting a nuanced understanding of human physiology. Athletes cultivated resilience, tactical awareness, and mental focus, demonstrating a holistic approach to excellence. Success was seen as the product of natural talent, disciplined practice, and strategic intelligence, embodying the Greek ideal of harmonious development of body and mind. Ethical conduct remained central to the games. Cheating, arrogance, or violent behavior was condemned both socially and spiritually. Victory was meaningful only when accompanied by moral integrity, courage, and respect for the rules and fellow competitors. The Olympics functioned as both competition and ethical education, teaching the principles of fairness, discipline, and honor through direct observation and participation. Athletes became exemplars of virtue, inspiring spectators and reinforcing societal norms. Records of victors preserved continuity and memory. Names were inscribed on stone, celebrated in poetry, and recounted orally, creating a shared historical consciousness. Athletes who triumphed became part of a long tradition, linking generations across centuries. The preservation of these records ensured that the moral, cultural, and athletic ideals of Olympia were transmitted through time, reinforcing the festival's enduring significance. The philosophical significance of the Games was profound. Observers contemplated human potential, ethical behavior, and the interplay between effort and reward. The physical contests illustrated principles debated by thinkers: courage, justice, discipline, and the balance between human endeavor and divine favor. In this way, the Olympics became a framework for intellectual reflection as well as a celebration of physical achievement, integrating action, thought, and moral education into a single experiential continuum. Yet even as Olympia thrived, the world around it began to change. Political instability, shifting alliances, and expanding empires gradually altered the landscape of Greek life. By the late Hellenistic period and early Roman era, Olympia faced increasing challenges. While the Games continued, their character and administration began to adapt to new political realities. Roman officials became involved, offering sponsorship, infrastructure, and occasionally interference. The religious and civic context of the festival evolved, but the underlying ideals, excellence, virtue, and devotion remained remarkably resilient. The sanctuary itself expanded during Roman influence. New buildings including baths, accommodation for visitors, and additional temples reflected both practical needs and imperial prestige. Roman rulers recognized the symbolic power of Olympia and invested in its maintenance and enhancement. Athletes continued to train and compete, now within a context that blended Greek tradition with Roman administration and patronage. The Games, though adapting to political and cultural shifts, preserved their spiritual and ethical framework, demonstrating the resilience of tradition across changing circumstances. At the same time, the character of competition gradually shifted. While athletic skill remained central, wealth, sponsorship, and political influence increasingly shaped participation and recognition. Professionalism emerged more prominently, with some athletes competing for rewards or under the patronage of powerful individuals. Despite these changes, the ethical and religious dimensions of the festival endured, ensuring that Olympia remained more than a spectacle. It continued to be a space of moral and spiritual significance. Religious practice remained deeply embedded. Sacrifices, prayers, and ritual ceremonies continued to accompany each Olympiad, with priests and priestesses ensuring proper observance. The Games were understood as acts of devotion, linking human effort to divine favor. Even as political and social circumstances evolved, the sacred dimension of Olympia provided continuity and meaning, preserving the festival's original purpose of honoring the gods through human excellence. Spectators, too, continued to shape the experience of the Games. Citizens, visitors, and dignitaries observed competitions with reverence, moral engagement, and appreciation for skill and virtue. Storytellers and musicians enriched the atmosphere, weaving narratives that highlighted heroism, discipline, and devotion. The festival remained a communal experience, fostering reflection, admiration, and ethical instruction among all participants, observers, and pilgrims. Over time, The sanctuary of Olympia faced natural and human challenges. Earthquakes, flooding, and structural deterioration gradually affected the buildings and pathways. Political instability in the later Roman period disrupted travel and patronage. Despite these challenges, the memory and cultural significance of the games persisted, maintained in records, poetry, art, and oral tradition. The ideals of excellence, moral integrity, and devotion continued to resonate across the Greek and Roman world, ensuring that Olympia's legacy endured even as its physical structures declined. By the 4th and 5th centuries CE, as Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, the character of Olympia and the Olympic Games faced profound transformation. Pagan rituals were increasingly suppressed, temples were abandoned, and athletic festivals gradually ceased. The once thriving sanctuary fell silent, olive groves and temples left to the quiet rhythm of nature. Yet the memory of the games, recorded in inscriptions, art, poetry, and historical accounts, preserved their cultural and moral significance. The ideals cultivated over a millennium, the pursuit of excellence, the balance of body and spirit, the integration of human endeavor with divine reverence, remained a powerful legacy. Even in silence, Olympia continued to influence the imagination. Scholars, travelers, and later historians studied the ruins, reconstructing the grandeur of the festivals and the achievements of athletes across centuries. The story of Koroibos and the first footrace, the evolution of events, the integration of religious devotion, civic pride, and moral instruction all became part of a narrative that shaped Western understanding of human potential, competition, and cultural identity. In this way, the first Olympic Games, born from a single race, had become more than a festival. They were a symbol of the enduring human desire to strive, to honor, and to connect with something greater than oneself. They reflected the rhythms of Greek life, the moral and spiritual values of the culture, and the communal bonds forged through shared experience. Even centuries after Olympia fell silent, the ideals of the Games persisted, inspiring the revival of Olympic competition in modern times and reminding humanity of the profound connection between effort, virtue, and memory. As the ancient Olympic Games gradually faded from active practice, their cultural and moral resonance endured across centuries. Even as the temples of Olympia fell into disuse, the Alpheos River flowing quietly through the valley, and the olive groves swaying in the gentle wind, the stories of athletes, victories, and divine favor persisted in memory. Inscriptions, and the written accounts of historians and travelers. These accounts preserved more than mere records of events. They encapsulated ideals, ethics, and cultural values that had evolved over a millennium of Olympiads. The early Christianization of the Roman Empire brought new spiritual frameworks to the regions surrounding Olympia. Pagan temples were abandoned or repurposed, and the sacred rituals that had accompanied athletic contests ceased. Yet, rather than erasing the legacy of the Games, this transition transformed the way they were remembered. Ancient texts, poems, and historical records became repositories of cultural memory. Philosophers and historians, such as Pausanias, who traveled centuries later to observe the ruins, described the temples, statues, and events in careful detail, preserving both factual knowledge and the ethical significance of the competitions. The moral and spiritual ideals embedded in the Games. The pursuit of excellence, respect for opponents, devotion to higher principles, remained influential in intellectual and cultural discourse, even in the absence of active competition. Stories of individual victors continued to inspire admiration. Koroibos, the first recorded Olympic champion, remained a symbolic figure, representing the simplicity and nobility of human aspiration. Later athletes whose feats were inscribed on stone or commemorated in bronze and marble embodied the holistic ideal of the Greek athlete, strength and skill tempered by discipline, courage, and moral integrity. Even as the physical spaces of Olympia deteriorated, these narratives persisted in poetry, inscriptions, and educational texts, transmitting lessons in virtue and perseverance to new generations far removed from the original festival. The decline of Olympia also created a space for reflection on the broader significance of the Games. Without active competition, the story of the Olympics became a historical and philosophical meditation on human potential and cultural achievement. Scholars analyzed the structure of the festival, the integration of athletics and ethics, and the interconnection of civic pride and religious devotion. The Games were recognized not simply as entertainment or sport, but as a formative institution in Greek society, shaping both individual character and collective identity. The ethical lessons of fair competition, courage, and respect continued to resonate long after the last footrace had been run. During the Middle Ages, Olympia faded almost entirely from physical awareness. Its temples crumbled, and natural processes reclaimed much of the site. Yet, the moral and historical memory of the Games persisted in scholarly work, travel accounts, and stories transmitted across generations. By the Renaissance, European intellectuals had rediscovered classical texts, reinvigorating interest in ancient Greek culture. Artists, philosophers, and scholars studied the moral and aesthetic dimensions of Olympia, its statues, and its festivals, fascinated by the ideals of human excellence, balance, and ethical conduct embodied in the Games. The first Olympic footrace, once a local event, had become emblematic of human aspiration, inspiring admiration across cultures and centuries. The study of Olympia during the Renaissance and Enlightenment revealed the profound sophistication of ancient Greek culture. Scholars reconstructed details of athletic events, observed the moral frameworks underlying the competitions, and documented the integration of religious ritual with physical endeavor. These investigations highlighted the ways in which the Olympic Games functioned as a holistic educational and cultural system. Beyond mere sport, Olympia exemplified the alignment of body, mind, and spirit with civic and spiritual life. The ideals of virtue, discipline, and honor that had shaped ancient competitors became guiding principles in philosophical discourse and cultural reflection. By the 18th and 19th centuries, interest in ancient Olympia intersected with broader cultural movements, emphasizing health, education, and civic engagement. The revival of physical culture in Europe drew inspiration from classical ideals, promoting exercise, athletic training, and organized competition as instruments of moral and social development. Educators, philosophers, and cultural leaders recognized that the ancient Olympic model offered a template for integrating physical achievement with ethical and civic instruction. The memory of Olympia thus served as both historical reference and practical inspiration, linking centuries of human experience with contemporary aspirations for character and excellence. The 19th century marked a turning point in the story of the Olympics. Scholars and archaeologists, increasingly methodical in their study of ancient sites, identified and began to excavate the ruins of Olympia. These excavations revealed the scale, structure, and sophistication of the sanctuary, the temple of Zeus, the altars, treasuries, training grounds, and spectator seating. Each discovery provided tangible evidence of a festival that had endured for centuries, confirming historical accounts and illuminating the moral, religious, and civic dimensions of the Games. The physical remains of Olympia offered a powerful reminder of the continuity of human ambition and the enduring value of ethical competition. Simultaneously, the intellectual climate of Europe, shaped by Romanticism and a renewed interest in classical antiquity, encouraged reflection on the moral and aesthetic significance of the Olympics. Writers, educators, and civic leaders explored the potential of reviving athletic festivals in contemporary contexts, inspired by the virtues exemplified in the ancient competitions. The first footrace of Koroibos, the development of pentathlon events, the integration of religious ritual, and the moral instruction embedded in Olympia's festivals provided a compelling template for modern athletic and civic initiatives. The modern Olympic movement, spearheaded by Pierre de Coubertin in the late 19th century, consciously drew on the moral, cultural, and athletic heritage of ancient Olympia. De Coubertin recognized that the ancient games embodied a holistic vision of human development, the cultivation of physical skill, ethical character, and social cohesion. He sought to translate these ideals into a contemporary international framework, emphasizing fair competition, discipline, and moral education. The revival of the Olympics was not merely about sport, it was an attempt to re-establish a cultural and ethical institution that connected past and present, body and mind, human effort and social responsibility. In preparation for the first modern Olympiad in 1896, the memory of ancient Olympia played a central role. Architects, planners, and organizers studied ancient texts, archaeological reports, and artistic depictions to recreate venues and competitions that reflected the spirit, if not the exact form, of the classical games. The symbolism of Olympia, its emphasis on virtue, excellence, and divine or moral inspiration, was embedded in the structure of the festival. Opening ceremonies evoke the ceremonial aspects of ancient tradition, while competitions showcase the physical prowess and ethical conduct of athletes. The revival thus created a living bridge between the ancient world and the modern era, translating centuries of history into a contemporary expression of shared human aspiration. The inaugural modern Olympics celebrated both continuity and transformation. Athletes from diverse nations competed under rules emphasizing fairness, respect, and moral conduct. Spectators observed and reflected, echoing the role of the ancient audience in shaping both ethical and social outcomes. Ceremonial elements, inspired by ancient ritual, reinforced the symbolic significance of the festival. In this way, the first modern Olympiad connected the ancient legacy of Olympia with a global, contemporary vision of human excellence. The Games became a platform for cultural exchange, civic pride, and moral instruction, echoing the centuries-old ideals embedded in the first footrace of Koroibos. The enduring influence of Olympia extends even beyond the modern Olympics. The principles embedded in the ancient games, balance of body and mind, pursuit of excellence, respect for others, and ethical competition, continue to inspire education, athletic training, and civic engagement worldwide. Athletes, spectators, and educators draw on these ideals to cultivate character, encourage discipline, and foster social cohesion. The story of Olympia remains a touchstone, illustrating how a single festival, evolving over centuries, can shape cultural, moral, and intellectual life across millennia. Through the calm lens of reflection, one can imagine the continuous thread that connects the first Olympiad to the present day. The quiet olive groves of ancient Olympia, the soft flow of the Alpheus River, the worn stone paths and altars, the triumphant cries of victors, and the reverent attention of spectators all resonate through time. These images, preserved in memory, art, and literature, bridge the gap between ancient footraces and modern global competitions, reminding us of the enduring human desire to strive, to honor, and to connect with something greater than ourselves. Even now, the legacy of the first Olympic Games offers lessons in perseverance, virtue, and aspiration. The story of Koroibos race, the evolution of the pentathlon, wrestling, and chariot events, the integration of ethical and spiritual frameworks, and the eventual revival in the modern era, all demonstrate the profound connection between human effort and cultural memory. The Games, at once physical, ethical, and communal, illustrate how traditions, when carefully preserved and thoughtfully adapted, can inspire generations far beyond their original context. As we imagine the sanctuary of Olympia today, overgrown with olive trees, quiet but dignified, we sense both the stillness of centuries and the echo of countless footsteps. The athletes who once trained there, the spectators who observed in reverence, the priests and priestesses who guided ritual, and the city, states that invested in the festival, all of them contributed to a story that extends from the first simple footrace to the present day. The Olympic Games remain a testament to human aspiration, endurance, and moral reflection, a story that continues to unfold in every competition, every athlete, and every spectator who embraces its ideals. And so, as we bring this long journey to a close, we can reflect on the extraordinary story of the Olympic Games. From the simple foot race won by Koroibos in ancient Olympia to the grand, multi-event festivals that celebrated physical skill, moral virtue, and civic pride, the Olympics evolved over centuries into a remarkable cultural institution. They intertwined athletic competition with ethical reflection, religious devotion, and artistic expression, shaping not only individual character, but the identity of entire communities. We witnessed how the games grew in scale, with diverse events like running, wrestling, boxing, the pentathlon, and chariot racing. We saw how spectators and athletes alike participated in a moral and spiritual framework, understanding that victory was meaningful only when paired with virtue, discipline, and respect. Even as the games declined in the later centuries of antiquity, their story lived on in historical records, literature, art, and philosophical reflection. And centuries later, the revival of the modern Olympic Games reconnected the world with this ancient legacy, translating the values of excellence, perseverance, and ethical competition into a global celebration that continues to inspire millions today. From the quiet olive groves of Olympia, through the footsteps of ancient athletes, to the modern stadiums filled with people from every corner of the world, the thread of human aspiration remains unbroken. The Olympic Games remind us of the timeless connection between effort, morality, and the joy of striving towards something greater than ourselves. They teach us that while times change, the values of courage, discipline, and respect endure. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the origins and history of the first Olympic Games. I hope it has been both calming and inspiring, a story to carry with you as you rest or reflect. If you enjoyed this history, make sure to subscribe and follow for more calm, immersive stories that explore the richness of our shared past. Your curiosity and attention help keep history alive, and I can't wait to take you on another journey soon. Thank you, truly, for listening, and may the stories of the past continue to inspire your dreams tonight.